Howdy, this is Lemmy and Nick with Dorman Products. It's 2022. We are feeling the pain at the pump, and we know some of you are too. Today we're talking about various fuels and powertrains for vehicles rolling our roads. We're kind of re-examining gas versus diesel and see if anything sort of has changed over the past couple months, years, decades, depending on how far we go back here. So we want to kind of discuss some of the merits of the different fuels you can use for your vehicle. Let's kick this thing off. We should probably let you viewers in on what we own too. So Nick does have an enormous trailer he hauls his race car around with. He owns a diesel truck. I have two gasser trucks. So I feel like we should also let them know exactly how we spent our money in the past.
Yeah, disclose our information. What's your preference on if you were buying a car? What would your preference be? Gas or a diesel?
Oh, gas. There's literally no reason to buy a diesel car.
Perfect. Agreed. I totally agree. With maintenance costs and things like that, like why have to get into a diesel if you don't really need it?
Yeah, and I don't think there's that many options unless you're buying used. I mean, there's just not a ton out there.
Yeah.
Let's go to the real use for diesel as far as I'm concerned. How about a truck, gas or diesel?
Depends. There's really no clear-cut answer for that.
Beautiful answer.
If I was buying a truck just for a daily driver or being able to haul appliances and things like that, like normal day-to-day, I would definitely opt for a gas truck. I'd be pretty much grabbing some type of crew cab that I can multi-use. I'm considering my situation. I have a big 26-foot trailer that I got to haul. Full of parts and my car and a lot of parts and things like that. There is really no gas truck that's capable, so I have to go with a diesel on that.
Yeah, but for a truck, it's funny because you've owned both gassers and diesels. I have owned both gassers and diesels. To your point, they certainly both have their strong suits, and it depends. Really, is the answer. What are you doing with it? You mentioned sort of like I think you kind of opened up with like average homeowner stuff, and I totally agree with you. Like a small gasser pickup is like perfect for most people who are just running stuff to the dump or picking up plywood or drywall or whatever. It's beautiful. But again, if you have sort of what I would call like the heavy duty hobbies, right? You pull a boat, you have a race car, etc. A diesel starts to look a lot more attractive even if you're not using it to earn money.
Yeah, I mean personally I would prefer a gas truck if there was one capable, but it just doesn't exist.
Sure. So let's talk about actually I guess gas versus diesel. Let's talk about like what are some of the pros you like about your diesel?
I mean, for me, it's mainly I'm buying a diesel for towing, and I just want that torque on demand. I don't want to be struggling going up hills or towing a heavy load.
So power, and I think judging how the market looks, right? I would agree with you, I guess. I mean, I would agree. Probably the main reason to buy a diesel is because you need power, or I guess speed to some degree or another. But
and how you don't really feel the trailer, like it's obviously an HD chassis, so the weight and things like that. I gotta have a dually, so I mean it's a lot more stable. And if it had if I had a gas option dually, I'd be really paying for it in the fuel. It cost me a lot more to operate. I mean, now there's kind of like a balance because diesel is so expensive in comparison to gas from what it was. But yeah, it just wouldn't make sense to have the gas option overall. All right, so on the flip side, I mean, we talked about why choose diesel. Why would you choose a gas truck? I have some of my own options, but I want to know why you would choose a gas truck.
Yeah, that's a great question. For me personally, I mean, gassers are almost always the more inexpensive option, right? So they're cheaper to buy initially. Many times they're cheaper to operate and run. And then on a use case scenario too, right? If you don't need maximum pulling power, you don't need all that oomph, you can get by with a gas truck, right? Not everybody who needs a truck is necessarily pulling something really heavy. Sometimes you're moving something that's just unwieldy, right? If you're moving, I don't know, engines around or your dirt bikes or something that's not like crazy heavy, you could get away with a gas. You just don't need a diesel.
Right.
Some of the other strong points of the gassers too, I think are, at least for me personally, I feel like a little silly saying it, but I'm much more comfortable working on a gasser than a diesel. I have a lot more experience.
You need different types of tools for a diesel and things like that, so a gas truck is...
And the tools are all bigger. Yeah. They all cost more money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I think one of the biggest points for me, I prefer a gas truck is because just oil changes, the amount of oil that you need in a diesel engine versus a gas engine, your oil changes could go from $50 to $150, and you have to do that so frequently, you know, several times a year.
Yeah, and adding insult to injury too, you can't take the product from the oil change and dump it into the diesel's tank anymore either, the way you could many years ago. That doesn't really help the savings there at all. Nick, if you had to buy a new truck today, are you buying a gas or are you buying a diesel truck?
I mean, for me in my situation, I'll probably have to buy a diesel, mainly because of the trailer that I haul. If I was to keep my truck, you know, my older diesel truck, and just wanted to buy a new truck, it would totally be a gas truck, something to get around that I didn't, if I had to go pick up, you know, 4x8 sheet of sheetrock, I wouldn't have to take my diesel truck. I'd be able to take, you know, like say a Nissan Titan or a Toyota Tundra or something like that.
You know, that's actually a really great point, because I'm thinking about this for myself as well. If I were buying a new truck and it was my only truck, I probably would buy a gasser. I'd probably buy the biggest gasser motor I could in a 3/4 ton truck, to kind of hedge my bets a little bit and be able to extend my capability over what I currently have now, which is just half-ton gassers. But if it was an additional truck, you've opened my mind a little. If it was an additional truck, I almost certainly would buy a diesel if I had a use for it, if that makes any sense. I'm usually not pushing the edges of the limits of my trucks, but if I was, I would definitely be looking at a deal.
Almost absolutely. All right, now what about the cost of fuel, you know, gas or diesel, and the emissions nowadays? How would that affect your choice on what you purchased?
I actually, like, my heart goes out to diesel owners right now in 2022, because you're getting walloped twice, right? You're getting hit on the cost of diesel. I mean, I'm seeing diesel north of $7 in some area, and you know, we're shooting this right now in July, but I don't know, you know, what this is going to look like later in the year or years going by. But $7 a gallon for diesel, like, makes my eyebrows go up. It hurts me. My wallet is in great pain right now. But then also, to your point, what you just said, the emissions equipment on these things is nuts. Like, think of all the stuff you repair. What breaks on these things?
A lot of you know, you have your DPF, you have there's NOx sensors for the DEF system, there's DEF pumps, DEF heaters, all these things which are, you know, in the line of work that I am, I see how they fail, you know, and these things are something that fails at, you know, 60,000 miles or less. You know, the DEF system is highly corrosive, the DEF fluid, so all those parts, the DEF injector, things like that are in the exhaust, seeing extreme heat and things like that, these parts that are failing on a, you know, 2 to 5 years basis, you know, you could be spending $2,000–3,000 every 3 years in addition to your normal maintenance costs. So, I mean, that is a huge factor.
So let's talk about maybe like what might be a more inexpensive option. How do you feel about the current crop of like half-ton diesels that are out there?
For me, I mean, I do like the idea of it. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but man, I would love if you know, that new diesel, you know, Titan was a great truck, because I had a Titan gas truck and it was awesome until it couldn't haul the new trailer that I bought. You know, I would totally opt for, you know, one of those gas trucks, and having the diesel option would be great. But
I think that's a pretty good point. I think we're sort of in a similar spot on that. I look at these, and I'll be honest, and my apologies to anybody who owns one of these. I am personally not very impressed by a lot of the drivetrains in these half-ton diesels. So, you know, the one that Ram is using right now, that Eco Diesel, I've seen just a myriad problems with those things. I'm just not super fond of that Cummins you mentioned earlier that went into those Nissans. It just doesn't seem to have that legendary status that the straight sixes do. A lot of people have reported sort of underwhelming performance and you know, more problems maybe than the truck might be worth. I don't have a lot of familiarity with what GM is doing right now with their half-ton diesel. I know they got something in the works. I don't know a ton about it, so I can't really speak to that too much. But I look at this sort of from a little bit older perspective, right? Like, I generally have old ancient stuff that Nick always laughs at, but you know, I've had a couple of 6.2 Chevy diesels. I'm familiar with the 6.5s, the Ford 6.9, to some degree or another the 7.3. Like, some of those older powertrains, especially I'm thinking specifically of that 6.2 you could get in a half-ton truck. The old crop of half-ton diesels made a ton of sense at their time, right? Diesel was cheap. This diesel could do almost the work of a small block V8, give or take, depending, and they were just unbelievably affordable to run. They ran reliably for a good long time, blah, 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 whatever. They didn't have much emissions equipment on it, sure. Nowadays, though, it's like you don't get the performance of the bigger diesels, and you get hit with the added cost when you go to buy it. Plus, the diesel itself's expensive.
Yeah.
I don't know that it makes sense right now.
Yeah, no, that probably does not. I'd rather have like a more capable truck if I'm spending the money on diesel.
Completely agree
Yeah,
with you.
absolutely.
You know, we've talked about this really in terms, though, of what you and I need for, like, you know, our stupid stuff we do on the side. But what about, like, a fleet operator? Because they have a totally different set of demands than we do.
I mean, and I guess it depends on what the fleet's being used for. There's a lot of different, you know, there's so many different variables in it. But I mean, generally speaking, if you're doing a ton of miles, you know, a diesel truck is going to be favorable. You know, it's going to cost more to maintain, but it's going to last a lot longer. What do you think?
I might counter that a little bit, and I would say, again, coming back to it depends, right? So I'm thinking specifically, I'm thinking of like the Lay's guy or the, you know, or the bakery trucks, et cetera, right? They're not moving particularly heavy product, so a lot of times they do fine on gas, right? So you don't have the wear and tear on the chassis like that you would expect maybe on, you know, like, you know, something else. You don't necessarily, you know, I think you can probably recover the cost of that fuel pretty quickly.
True.
You know, and who knows what fuel prices are going to do? Who knows what emissions are going to do, right? Like the picture is very different now than it's been 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
All right, well, that was a lot of fun. If you like the video, definitely drop a like and a subscribe, and maybe put in the comments below any other suggestions you have for future videos. This is Lemmy, I'm Nick, and we're out of here.